All right, earlier we were speaking to our international editor, Sophie Mokoena, following those EFF statements on the BRICS summit coming up and also what is happening in Russia itself.
What we saw earlier on yesterday when the president arrived and when he met President Putin on arrival, where he was receiving the guests, the body language was quite cordial and the greeting typical of how people on the continent greet each other. I mean, the hug and the handshake was quite normal. I didn't see anything, but the reality is we expected a meeting where President Putin was going to meet the 7 heads of state and government who went to Kyiv and St. Petersburg a few months ago, where they were trying to bring together two countries to engage in talks. We haven't heard much about that. I saw that yesterday the leaders themselves did meet, but not with President Putin. We are still waiting for that confirmation. The other issue is that today the president did participate, delivered his speech as we carried the clip earlier on, but we are still waiting for the bilateral with President Putin. I haven't received any video or reports from the team and also from the presidency about the bilaterals. I only saw what was on more than in a summit hall.
Yeah. So there's live visuals. It looks like it's very public what is happening now. So you'll watch and see for confirmation that those talks have happened behind closed doors. When he was addressing the president asserting the sovereignty of African nations, saying that they should have the freedom to choose their own stance, essentially on foreign policy. That's my summary, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems to be a common refrain from him on the international stage at the moment. Sophie, is it a response to criticism that continues? We were looking at the landing page of CNN today asking, why is South Africa putting its relationship with the US and EU at risk?
Well, when you look at that page, it speaks to that. South Africa is under pressure, particularly from the Western countries, including the United States of America, to isolate Russia. And therefore, he is under pressure. I mean, the decision to agree that South Africa or the law enforcement agencies will cooperate with the International Criminal Court to arrest President Putin if he is in the country speaks to the pressure the president finds himself under. And the second issue is that it doesn't stop. Even now, you have many people coming to South Africa from the West, and the message is one: please distance yourself from Putin. Distance yourself from Russia. It is even affecting their trade relations when they talk. Therefore, I think the president again used this platform knowing that millions and millions are watching, because the story is being carried worldwide, including media houses in Western countries. And he was sending a message, again, based on the South African policy, the non-aligned policy, but also to say, you can't push us to change our policy position because you now have an enemy in Russia when you were together, when you were fighting the Second World War. And therefore, I think he was trying to communicate that message, but also indicating to President Putin that they have to talk and something must happen. And President Putin responded by saying that, yes, indeed, the 7 leaders did try, but unfortunately, the meeting is not happening because when you look at President Zelensky, the Americans and the West are really pushing behind the scenes that this meeting shouldn't happen. And therefore, it's a very, very difficult time for President Ramaphosa and South Africa in particular in relation to the war in Ukraine.
Especially difficult because, as you've pointed out, there will be the BRICS summit, but also discussions about agoa, which is the law that gives exports from various African countries preferential access to US markets. And we know that the car makers have really found that very attractive, and that's why we see so many making cars in South Africa. So two crucial things happening at the same time. But Sophie, because we're running out of time, EFF celebrations tomorrow, and the the EFF leader, Julius Malema, suggesting that government has sold out by issuing that explicit statement that it would arrest Putin. So this issue also could become very influential, or is it already as we head to elections?
Indeed, as we head towards the BRICS summit, this is going to be a topical issue. And I sense that EFF is up to something. The fact that he has called on member countries within the BRICS group, Brazil, India, China, to isolate South Africa in a sense that they shouldn't come. They should also participate virtually. In the same way President Putin is going to participate, speaks to this whole issue of some people who are very aggrieved in terms of what has transpired, and therefore he made that call. And secondly, he in the same way, the president of South Africa in St. Petersburg is trying to explain South Africa's position, and Africa in particular. Malema tried to do the same during the day, where he was explaining to the diplomats that Africa is tired of being bullied, and Africa cannot continue to be bullied. And also going as far as saying that he spoke about agoa also, saying that we can't have a situation where we are being threatened that as a country agoa will not be renewed because of our position. Why do you do this? But the reality is you cannot end this agreement abruptly. The motor industry, you know better, you are an economic reporter and an anchor, that there's a lot at stake on issues that are related to agoa if this agreement is not extended, because the motor industry, the FDIs, you know, it will be a serious problem for the country. Not only the country, the entire continent.
It's massive, I agree. In 10 seconds or less, will the Netball World Cup bring some positivity amongst all of this? All right.
Victory, victory, girls. Victory, 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 victory.
That was our earlier discussion with Sophie Mokoena, and the women heard, because they are in the lead. We're counting down to the end of their game against Wales. On my screen, 52-40, so we're 12 points in the lead, and hopefully that lead can last just for another 10 minutes.